From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello and welcome again. Our guests today are Bill Press, who is a lauded liberal, and Ryan Giedrowski, who is a conservative with cultivation. And we welcome you both. And on that note, we should go to our issue 1, Pompeo's problem.
Completing another trip to North Korea this week, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is under pressure. A month after the historic Singapore summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea, the U.S. has little to show for its diplomatic efforts. After all, while President Trump has heaped praise on Kim Jong-un and has claimed that the North Korean nuclear threat is now over, U.S. intelligence findings suggest that North Korea continues to develop its nuclear and ballistic missile weapons programs. In addition, no inspectors have yet set foot on North Korean soil. That leaves Mr. Pompeo, the lead U.S. negotiator with North Korea, confronting criticism that he and the president are allowing Kim Jong-un to take the U.S. for a nuclear ride.
Question, Pat, does Pompeo need to start delivering more, and do the recently introduced tariffs this week on China make it more likely that China is now going to say to the U.S., hey, we're not helping you anymore?
Let's take the Bolton position, which has been pretty much the administration position is they give up everything on their nuclear weapons and their development of them and the facilities, turn them over to us before we make the first concession in lifting sanctions. That is not going to fly. I'm sure Pompeo is coming back and saying Kim Jong-un wants a step-by-step process. We make a concession, you make a concession, and I think that's what it's going to come down to, and it's going to be very tough because there's going to have to be a bit of a stand down, I think, by the Trump administration, the Trump White House. However, I am a believer that some deal is better than no deal.
Bill, do you want to jump in there?
Sure. This is no deal. This is a big, giant nothing burger. I think we're all being taken for a ride. God please this summit work and they get rid of their nuclear weapons. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But so far, we had a great big photo op in Singapore. And since walking out of that, North Korea still has all its nuclear weapons. They've agreed to get rid of not one, to destroy
What would you
not
do
one.
to get it going in the right direction?
Well, I wouldn't give up all the military exercises with South Korea, for example. I wouldn't be sending Pompeo back. I said, you put something on the table and we'll come back. What'd they go? They went and took him an Elton John CD. Okay, now we got the Elton John CD. At least he got more than we got. We got nothing out of this.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the problem with the Trump administration is facing is that the peace process is moving with South Korea. They want a peace deal no matter what.
Right.
So our hands are slightly bound by this because South Korea is going to move towards a peace agreement whether we like it or not, and it's just a matter of how much can we get out of it while we can get something. I think that concessions can be made. I think we can sit there and make negotiations and have agreements, and it's got to be tit for tat, as Pat said. But I think that the reason he's there, Pompeo's there, is to sit there and have a trust.
Do you think the president should express some sort of slightly less amused tweets about Kim Jong-un now to try and
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the thing that breaks
Well,
the
you can't call him Rocket Man anymore.
He gave him the CD from
Clarence,
Rocket
how
Man.
do you read this?
I agree. We need more Twitter diplomacy here,
Right.
of a more serious nature. But you know, what does this look like from distance? That Donald Trump got in, had a great photo op, and then came on back home, moved on to other matters, sends Pompeo behind him. But he's already given away so much in terms of both the tests as well as the war games, as Trump calls them, and all that. Getting people back to the table is going to be a whole new process.
This is at a crunch right now because, look, Trump, they've oversold it to a degree that, Bolton are going to give up everything. It's all going to be going in here. No, it's not. And so what the Trump folks are going to have to do now is decide whether we want nothing and walk away and say we were had, or whether they want to continue going down this road to an agreement as the South Koreans want to do. And my view is, again, some deal is better than no deal, and I don't think we're going to get rid of every North Korean atom bomb.
But the deal is, let's face it, North Korea is never going to give up its nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un does not want to end up like Muammar Gaddafi, number one. Number two, we have to accept the fact North Korea is now part of the nuclear club. They are. And by the way, you can blame President. Don't put all the blame on Trump. You go all the way back. Nobody's been able to stop that.
But what is the deal then? Is it that you don't have your long-range missiles?
The deal is, there is no deal. The deal is Kim Jong-un is now a world player. We made him one, and he's going to be invited to the White House.
Here's the problem. Look, the South Koreans want the deal. The Japanese are sitting over there with an economy 100 times the size of North Korea. And if they say North Korea's got short-range missiles that can hit us with nuclear weapons, but they can't hit the Americans, the Japanese will move toward a nuclear deterrent of their own.
So what do we do? Someone give me a solution.
You
All right, we'll give you one.
Keep on moving down the road.
That's right. That's right. At least have the appearance of progress, and talking is better than not talking. But you're right. North Korea is not going to give up the nukes that will offer them the protection and the world stature. And it's going to be very hard to oppose their having nukes if South Korea doesn't mind. And that's the direction we're moving toward.
Okay. I think we should have a deal in which they get to keep some nuclear weapons. Nuclear plants are closed down, ICBMs are taken away, the Japanese are consolidated, but we're in a position where I think, as Bill said, we don't have many options. Issue 2, runaway elephants.
Writing in the Washington Post this week, conservative columnist Max Boot argued for a Democratic takeover of Congress in the November midterm elections. Echoing other conservatives such as George Will, Boot laments President Trump's dominance of the Republican Party on issues such as free trade and political rhetoric. According to Boot, quote, "The entire Republican platform can now be reduced to 3 words, whatever Trump says," end quote. This, Boot concludes, means that, quote, "like post-war Germany and Japan, the Republican Party must be destroyed before it can be rebuilt," end quote.
Clarence, does Boot represent a small but significant part of the Republican Party that might be a problem for the GOP in November? Or is he the elite irrelevant that Trump might suggest he is?
I think so, a small but significant sector, certainly the what we liberals call thinking conservatives. That whole faction.
People unlike Pat, then. Is that right?
Pat, you're still a paleo-conservative, right? I mean, you're still one of
I think so. I might have been expelled from the party back somewhere.
Right, so
look, I don't know how the Republican
like
Party can survive the loss of Max Boot.
Right, yeah.
Look,
that's the thing.
Seriously here, look, this
You
represents, they're never Trumpers, they're neocons. They were totally against Trump in the election, and he won that. They're against him now, and he's got 90% of the party. They'll be against him in the future. I think they're just setting themselves up for fall, because if we lose the House, a lot of conservatives will say, the neocons and never Trumpers are responsible.
Yeah, right. For the first
Let's let Clarence back in here.
There will be a lot of finger pointing between conservatives, and you've seen that before. Sure. But what's really remarkable to me, though, is how little opposition Trump is getting publicly within the party, including the intellectual critics who don't have to stand
Why
for
is
office.
that? Tax cuts?
Well, yeah,
Supreme Court?
because those who are worried about getting reelected, those are the folks who are falling in line behind Trump, because Trump is the party now.
Could I just say,
and the grassroots have taken over. This is, I think, a short-term phenomena, but it's a very important term that we're going through right now.
The thing about Max Boot is that he said in his column that the Republican Party needs to be destroyed before it can be rebuilt. It was destroyed by George W. Bush and neoconservatives and everyone that Max Boot represents. That entire way of thinking. Bush left the White House with a minority of Congress, a minority in the Senate, a minority in the state legislators, the governorships. Everything was gone. And Trump rebuilt it. Not just Trump, but the Tea Party, the grassroots movement, the hardcore conservatives, they rebuilt it. What is conservative about Max Boot? He's pro-choice, pro-open borders. He wants endless wars. There is nothing conservative about him. He's lumped in because he sits there and wants tax
Let's let Bill in.
I feel like I should defend Max Boot, but I can't. I think he's a clown. I think all of them. I could count on one hand these so-called non-Trumpers who are going to rebuild the Republican Party.
Right.
They're gone. It's over. There is no Republican Party today. It's the Trump, as you said, Pat.
But Bill,
it's the Trump Party today.
Bill, is that though? Do you like that? Do you think that helps Democrats in the longer term with demographics?
Here's what I don't like it. I love it because it used to be Democrats who formed the circular firing squad. Now to stand and watch Republicans do it, let me tell you.
Look, on taxes, on judges, on justices, deregulation, all Republicans, even the neoconservatives, agree. What Trump brings in is these new populist issues. No more idiotic interventions. Secure the border. America first in trade deals. No more $800 billion trade deficits.
Well, trade is going to get tested now, isn't it?
It's going to be tested, but look, nobody is going to go back to saying, we want to get another NAFTA and work with Bill Clinton.
Right.
That's dead.
What's true, you're getting a choice, not an echo, but just parenthetically, Democrats are not in the most wonderful shape right now either. We will see what happens when you get a candidate for this next presidential election, or for that matter, once we get past the midterms.
Do you think Ortiz Casio will run?
Well,
She's the leader of the party, Bill. So
in her district. But you know what's interesting here? We're talking about her the way we used to talk about Donald Trump. You know,
Right.
or isn't that quaint?
Right.
This
No,
New
that's
Yorker,
true. That is
New
true,
Yorker
isn't
coming
it?
in here, this interloper who won't have a chance. Well, look what Trump did.
Right.
Took over
All
the
right.
damn party.
Concluding
So-
comment.
My concluding comment is all these people, George Will included, who sat there and during the 8 years that Bush was president, who saw 2 failed wars, who saw exploding deficits, an open border that flooded, with illegal workers who depressed wages and drugs that killed their children, and didn't comment and didn't criticize, and now they're on their high horse that
So
Trump
you're
is going to ruin the country.
You're a Max Boot fan.
Oh, please.
All right, we got that. We're moving on. Afghanistan not yet lost, though. We need more State Department people. Issue 3, so long, servers.
As Emily Badger reported in a recent article for the New York Times, San Francisco is leading a restaurant revolution in which diners use self-service machines to order and receive their food. One Bay Area restaurateur, Anjan Mitra, explained why he got rid of servers at his restaurants, saying, quote, "If we were to pay what we need to pay people to make a living in San Francisco, a $10 hamburger would be a $20 hamburger, and it wouldn't make sense anymore. Something has to give," end quote. And with San Francisco's minimum wage now at $15 an hour, the Times also notes another Bay Area restaurateur who says her labor costs now consume 43% of her budget, where in 1997 they consumed 27%. Other liberal-run cities are also passing minimum wage laws and providing new employer mandates, so the trend seems set to continue.
Bill, does this prove that the minimum wage can sometimes have the opposite effect of that which it was intended to do?
I don't think so. But first of all, I gotta say, and I come from San Francisco, lived there a long time. This didn't start in San Francisco. I mean, let's not give San Francisco credit. You go to Uno Pizzeria in Union Station, you sit down at the table, they got little machines where you order your food. You go to Wawa's on the Eastern Shore.
But is that because of the minimum wage?
No, I think it's because they're innovation and they're cutting costs. And the other thing is that the big story here, I think, is what's happening in San Francisco is these young, high-tech techies who are making incredible salaries are forcing all the people who could work for a minimum wage.
They're also paying incredible taxes, though, aren't they?
Out,
the
but
minimum
fine,
wage-
but they're pushing those people out. So
the
you
minimum
can't get
wage,
those workers.
what you're doing, you raise the wage of some workers, service workers, and then you cut the bottom 2 rungs off the ladder in which people get onto these. When I was a kid, I was out at Burning Tree Country Club. You're a caddy. It was all full of
That's why
black
they
guys
don't
on
allow
the bench.
women to play.
Okay, now they get, now you raise the wage of minimum wage, and now they get these carts, and they get rid of all these cabbies. These caddies, all these minimum wage jobs that every one of us had as a kid, whether it's mowing lawns, they're finding ways to get rid of those, and that is not good for the country.
At the same time, though, just try to get a kid to mow your lawn these days, because
Well, you
know,
get a
they got other
Hispanic
things to
kid
do.
doing
that when I
it,
was a
you know.
kid, so it wasn't
Yeah,
that long ago.
I did too.
I was a
that
busboy.
was entry-level employment, but
there are
now
Hispanic
they have to
kids
bus
now.
kids in. Exactly, Pat. That's right. You got to bus in kids from low-income neighborhoods, which is cool for them. But the fact is, the Silicon Valley effect has a much bigger impact on raising the true minimum wage, which is what the market will bear.
Right.
And that's always higher than what, I shouldn't say always, depending on the local economy, sometimes it'll be lower than the legal minimum wage. But the market itself will find itself.
But one
Yeah,
thing-
I
Ryan.
think that between the minimum wage laws and just the fact that San Francisco is the most expensive city in America right now
is.
to live in,
Yes.
that I think that human interaction is going to be just for the very rich. The very rich restaurants will always have waiters and waitresses.
why don't they let
but
the
it's
market-
just,
Ryan
but
finish.
it's just the.
So what's the solution?
There is. It's the way. I mean, go to
STEM.
Japan. and-
STEM is the solution.
No, it's not. No, it's not. You're going to see.
Ham for hamburger.
Well, no, but you create the new
market,
jobs, right?
If
the
you want a
jobs are
liberal
there.
program, then you have a market system and pay extra bucks from the government if you're going to do that to raise the wages of the lowest workers, but keep the market system going.
Okay.
No,
But-
but I have to say, this is the market system going. I don't have a problem with this.
Right.
But
$15
with
an hour.
When the economy's well.
with what the restaurants are doing, I think the problem is, you talk about income inequality. In San Francisco now, if you're not a young millionaire, you can't afford to live there.
Right.
And so they're chasing all
But
the other
do
people out.
liberals bear
That
some
is a
responsibility for that because of
What's wrong?
taxes?
What's wrong with it? What do you dislike about it? Well, you were complaining about California almost going bankrupt here a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah, they raised taxes, but they balanced the damn budget out there.
Well,
You
the
know, I mean,
pension liabilities are still there, right?
well, of course they are. Yeah, but that's not limited to one state.
Clarence,
Yeah.
Clarence, you're the Pulitzer man here. What is the solution, though?
Oh, solution to what?
to making sure that we can have jobs for people as well as lower costs?
Well, we make choices. You can try the legal minimum wage route or try whatever the market will bear. One way or another, that's what's really affecting.
But back me up on education. That's another idea, right?
Education is how you have upward mobility.
Right.
You want to mow a lawn for $10 an hour, you ought to be allowed to do it without having the government say you can't.
Right.
I was just going to say, there are plenty other parts of the country where there are good jobs available, and they ought to all be paid the minimum wage. I think $15 is enough. Make it a livable wage.
Right.
$15 minimum wage
San
in some
Francisco
places
is always
will
going to
shut
be left now for the people
That
who
will
are
shut down
Go to
some
Milton,
small
Ohio. That will
businesses.
shut down every business
that
left
argument's
open.
been made about shutting down small businesses.
$15 nationally
Yeah,
will
that
shut down businesses all
That
across
argument
America.
All
has
right.
been made forever. It's never been proven true.
Well,
Then make a
we
$400 an hour
come
minimum wage. I mean,
NATO summit shenanigans and Europe's big choice over the next minute or so. Log on to Twitter and follow us at McLaughlin Group. 2 great issues coming up. Do not leave us.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by Eric.org. With gridlock in Washington, states are stepping in to mandate paid sick and family leave policies, creating a compliance nightmare for companies with a nationwide workforce. The ERISA Industry Committee is fighting back. Learn how we can help your company at Eric.org.
For more than a century, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has focused on growing our regional economy. We work every day to foster collaboration, build pipelines for skilled workers, embrace innovation, and attract investment. We must think, plan, and act as a region to better leverage our shared assets so we can continue shaping and advancing a vibrant regional economy for the next 100 years.
Issue 4, Summit Showdown.
Preparing for next week's NATO summit in Brussels, Belgium, President Trump has been sending letters to America's NATO allies. His message? Spend more on defense capabilities, now. The president is angered by the failure of most of NATO's 29 member states to spend the NATO target of at least 2% of GDP on defense. At present, only the US, Britain, Estonia, Greece and Poland do so. As this NATO chart of 2017 member state defense spending shows, Canada and Europe's largest economy, Germany, spend well below the target. And while France and Britain have plans to boost their defense spending, Germany says it will only reach 1.5% of GDP defense spending by 2024. Still, Trump's critics say he should not be attacking NATO allies so publicly.
Ryan, is the president right to push Europeans and Canada in this way?
150%. He's right to push them. I mean, we are not the world's policemen. And at this point, I mean, NATO is a dinosaur of the Cold War. It is on its way to extinction, I truly believe it. There's very little holding Turkey and the United States and Canada together as far as interests
Do you think
go.
it should be held together?
No, and actually, I know YouGov polls show that even 30% of Republicans now want us to leave NATO completely. There's no Cold War, there's no USSR, there's no existential threat. Germany depends on Russia for their gas and a lot of their stuff. There's not going to be a big fight now between. I mean, Germany isn't invading Belarus. It's not.
But may they be invading the Baltics soon if we withdraw?
I mean, maybe, but are we going to sit there
Is
and
that
go?
a national interest, you think?
Really, Estonia is going to be a national interest for people in Iowa?
Right.
Is it a vital interest in which we should go to war with Russia? No. We should never have expanded NATO into Eastern Europe. But look, take Spain and Portugal. Are they afraid of Russia now, so we should increase defense? The real fear of Europe now, and you know it, is not from the East and Russia, it is from the South and across the Mediterranean. Immigration is the issue of the age, and it's especially acute in Europe, where they're really setting
All right,
up
well, we're going to
borders
get,
all
that's
over this
another
country.
issue, Pat. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Getting ahead of you.
I suggest talk to the people of Ukraine if you don't think Russia is a
They're
problem.
not in NATO.
Talk to the I don't care if they're in NATO or not. The issue is talk to the people of Crimea. Russia invades Ukraine, seizes Crimea.
They seem pretty happy in Crimea.
We do absolutely nothing. I think the fact is,
What should we do?
What's going to happen here is Donald Trump is going to go to the NATO summit. He's going to blow it up just like he did the G7 summit, and then go buddy-buddy with Vladimir Putin one more time, right? And look, these, I may be old-fashioned, but I think these NATO alliances, these Atlantic alliances, which have lasted for over 100 years, have done this country pretty damn well.
Wait, Clarence.
Pretty important, we should not be throwing them
Clarence
away.
is turn.
Well, yeah, I don't think we want to throw them away, but we got a lot of reevaluating to do. The Cold War is over, but Russia is still posing a threat in terms of cybercrime alone, intruding in people's elections, which our president doesn't want to talk about. But it's already happening even as we speak, right? Both intruding into European elections, intruding into our elections. Why are we in NATO? We need to talk about that in a serious way. I think right now, President Trump is actually winning friends on the other side by being the good landlord that he is.
Talking about intruding into elections,
catch up.
does the United States CIA and National Endowment for Democracy and all these color revolutions we've been running, do we not intrude in the elections and the internal politics of countries all over the world? Of course we do.
That's why we got. That's why we have to reevaluate.
Also, more importantly, what is Merkel going to do about Vladimir Putin intruding in elections? They're dependent on Russia. They are.
Right.
They're not going to sit there and do anything to Russia.
That's where you see Trump, the landlord, saying, "Hey, pony up."
It doesn't let us off the hook for the fact that they did intrude in the 2016 election. They're doing it in 2018, and we're doing nothing about it.
But that has nothing to do with NATO.
But NATO is getting into counterinsurgency now. It's important.
We're going to move on to another issue. NATO, very important. We should stick with it. It's important for the security of the West, but Germany should spend more. Issue 5, Europe's choice.
Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany and Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary exchanged sharply divergent views this week on how to address migration from North Africa. According to Merkel, quote, "Europe's soul is humanity, and if we want to keep that soul, if Europe and its values want to succeed in the world, then it must not close itself off," end quote. Orban, however, retorted, quote, "If we want to act humanely, then there must be no pull factor, and there is only one solution, closing off the borders and bringing the support over there, and not let those in who bring problems," end quote. This speaks to a growing crisis in the European Union over which nation should absorb migrants and how that absorption should take place, if at all.
Pat, now we're on this issue, but are these two viewpoints, Merkel and Orban, reconcilable?
No, they're not. You have the Schengen Agreement, with which I'm sure you're familiar, which allows basically Europe, almost like the states of the American Union, you can travel back and forth. Now you've got two forms of barriers being set up. One is to protect Europe, all the southern coast there from the Mediterranean invasion, if you will, by boat. Secondly, Hungary and Austria and Bavaria, all of them are setting up barriers to prevent immigrants once they reach the first line of countries to get into the second. That was my prediction. The Schengen Agreement is going by the wayside.
Okay, Bill.
Well, I must say, first of all, I think there's a big difference between the way Europe is handling this and the United States is handling this, and this latest accord between Merkel and the opposition. At least they're dealing with the problem of how to accept and how to deal with these refugees. They're not like us saying we're going to treat them all as criminals, as rapists or whatever, and send them all, and provide no due process, and send them all, rip the kids from their parents, and then send them all south. No, I mean,
Democratic talking point.
No, it's not a Democratic point. It's a real talking point. I think it's shameful. It's un-American what we're doing at the border. And I'll tell you something else. Just one final word from California. Right? You look at the Republican Party today.
Aren't you guys seceding from the United States?
The Republican Party in California does not exist. Why? Because of Pete Wilson going after the Latino community. Donald Trump is doing it. This is going to kill
Pete Wilson won the election because of his. But anyway, but what Merkel said was that humanity is Europe's inheritance. No, it's not. It is not. It's not the humanism of the French Revolution. That's not Europe's inheritance. It's Christian tradition, the history of Western civilization. That is Europe's inheritance. And what has happened now since 2015, since the rise of UKIP and Front National and AFD and Lega Nord and Law and Justice and Viktor Orban and Swedish Democrats, is that a sizable portion of young people, especially between 25 and 49, are sitting there and saying, "Is our civilization worth fighting for? Can we sit sit there and define it. Are we just bland Europeans, or are we Swedes? Are we Germans? And they're saying yes. And that's why Merkel saw a massive loss in her last election. And this is the trend going on in Europe. And that's why Italy is being run by right-wingers and populists.
And you think it'll continue?
Absolutely. Swedish Democrats are going to be the either biggest party in Sweden or the second biggest in the election coming up in November.
All right,
a lot of this, as we've seen, is political and economic pressures from outside of these countries, across the Middle East region and other places that are feeding the immigrant population. But Europe's problem with immigration is more complex than the U.S., where we've got more room and we've got more of a tradition of assimilation here than they do in Europe, where you have ethnicity and nationality tied together. Yeah, and it's but the fact is that much of this is dependent on economic trends as well. But this is a cycle now, which Pat is right. I will say that you proved to be more prophetic than I expected when you said we were going to be having, you were saying 10 years ago or more.
Thank you very much, Clarence.
But at the same time, I say that in the long run, I am right in saying that assimilation is the way of the future and the way of industrialized countries.
It's the ideology of those geniuses like Matt Boot, who said, hey, let's destroy Libya's government. It became a state of slavery and human, and that's what destroyed Europe.
Concluding comment, very quick.
No, the concluding comment again, we are the last ones to preach to anybody else about how we deal with immigrants. We fix our own problems in a humane way, then we can talk.
All right, it is a big issue. Anyway, we will be right back with predictions.
For more than a century, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has focused on growing our regional economy. We work every day to foster collaboration, build pipelines for skilled workers, embrace innovation, and attract investment. We must think, plan, and act as a region to better leverage our shared assets so we can continue shaping and advancing a vibrant regional economy for the next 100 years.
Predictions, Pat.
Your friend Theresa May, Tom, the Prime Minister, has come out for a soft Brexit.
She has.
And there's going to be a serious problem with the folks who wanted to break away from Europe inside the Conservative Party.
Interesting. Bill?
I'd like to make a prediction about the World Cup, but I can't follow it, so I'll make a prediction about our own World Cup, which is in the Supreme Court battle, that Susan Collins, no matter how much she pretends to be above the fray and won't vote for anybody who would break a precedent, she will vote for anybody that Donald Trump nominates, just like she did for Neil Gorsuch.
Ryan?
I am going to predict, actually, that Trump is going to pick Judge Kavanaugh to replace Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court.
Okay, interesting. Clarence?
I think for all the talk among Democrats about we're going to fight and we got to fight, there's really not much they can do to stop the Supreme Court nomination now. It's just going to, the process is going to move ahead.
Okay. Well, apart from their radiation poisoning or nerve gas, nerve agent poisoning, Russia has had a good World Cup. I predict, though, that President Trump will be greeted by mass protests when he visits Britain next week. But the US Secret Service and the Metropolitan Police's Protection Command will keep him safe. We're out of time today, but thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.